This is Lawyer versus Lawyer. This is Gary Berger. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Gary. It's good to be back together. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm doing great. How's it's like the end of the year. It's getting to be the end of the year. Did you get everything done in this year you're supposed to?
No, I have a long list.
Me
I
too.
got to be busy the last quarter.
You've been trying cases and doing stuff.
Yeah.
Let me turn to the topic of the day if I could.
I am distinguished guest.
I am excited to introduce our distinguished guest, Grant Doty. Hi, Grant.
Hi, good to see you, Gary.
Thanks for coming on our podcast and talking with us. We appreciate it. So, by way of introduction, Grant Doty is one of the best runners I know. He and I ran together in high school at Parkway South. He's an 84 grad. I'm an 85 grad. He's a much better runner than I. And Grant then went on in life, and I was in school with his younger sister, graduated with me, and then he went in and did a great career, and we're going to talk to him about that. And then he became a lawyer, and about 4 months ago or so matriculated over to work with me. So there it is.
That's exciting.
I tricked you about how long I knew him before we started.
You asked me, and I said, what, 10 years?
We're getting older.
Yeah.
Our friends are now decades now.
Brent does have that runner's body, but I bet you're the better diver.
Are you saying that I do not have a runner's body?
You have the diver body.
What does that mean? It's a sedentary sport where I
just
go underwater every once in a while?
You've seen Michael Phelps? You know, you got the broad shoulders.
Okay. That's a swimmer's body, not a diver's body. I mean, I have a lot of neoprene around. A lot of covering. I wear a lot of covering. Grant, welcome.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
What was your decision in going to West Point after high school? How was that decision, and how did it work out for you?
You know, I tell you, when I went to West Point, I kind of did it on a whim. It was not something that my family had done.
Were you like a service family, like so many families?
I did. My grandfather was in the Navy as a young seaman during World War II, and that was my only experience really with the military. And you know, I think one day I joked with my boys. I got this pamphlet from the Coast Guard Academy, and it had two things I liked on the cover: a cute girl, and they were playing ultimate frisbee. And I thought, you know, I can do those two things. I like girls and I like ultimate frisbee, so I applied, and kind of on a whim. And as it turned out, because I applied, West Point also sent me some literature, and I applied there as well. And lo and behold, I got in.
Did you have to have a recommendation from a senator?
So you do.
Who was?
So I had Robert Young. Do you remember Congressman Young? Yeah. So he was a congressman from Missouri. And, you know, what's interesting is you can apply, and so people shouldn't get discouraged because they think, oh, I don't know anybody fancy. You know, once you apply, West Point wants to get really good kids in there, and so they actually match you up with congressmen and senators who have spots.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool.
That is cool. I never knew. How did you know he needed a senator recommendation?
I just know for some of those schools you do, some of the Air Force Academy, West Point, Naval Academy, typically they ask one of your federal elected.
I never knew it. That's news to me. So what were you interested in going into long term?
You know, I really thought, you know, you owed 5 years when you left West Point, and I thought, you know, it would just be a really good chance to learn leadership. And so I actually didn't go in thinking one particular thing, but as I was there, I decided I wanted to be a combat engineer because it's kind of, you know, landmines and demolition. So as an 18 or 20-year-old, I mean, there's nothing better.
Sounds really cool.
Nothing better than blowing things up. And then as it turned out, I did it for 5 years.
Is that strategy? It's strategist kind of?
No, it's a really good.
It's physical.
Yeah, it's all physical. Okay. But what's interesting though is that my last 10 years in the military, I actually did strategy. So I was a combat engineer at the beginning, including I graduated from West Point in '88. And actually I was a young lieutenant in Desert Storm. So that was my sort of first war that I did.
Where were you?
So we started, I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, so it was an airborne unit, which is kind of cool. Again, my kids,
Scary.
I want to say, I hate to tell you, Gary, and I know you have lawyers who listen to this. My kids, when I tell them about what I did in the past, and I say I blew things up and I jumped out of planes, I'm really high on the cool scale. And now I have progressed from that through strategist to now I'm a lawyer, and I'm telling you that's a downward slope.
Agree. Stipulated. I hear you. So you did you armed combat in Desert Storm.
I did,
in the Iran-Iraq war, in the war.
We did. So that was and that was actually really I did a second war. I did Kosovo, but I was pretty high up in rank, not high rank, but I mean I wasn't a leader of men. And then I did Iraq the second time. I was there from 04 to 05. And by that time I was in a palace doing strategy. So
what does the palace mean? Does it mean a big tent?
No, I wish it, so. I was in tents in Desert Storm, but no, this was a palace that Saddam Hussein had, and it was on the outside.
Really, a palace?
Literally.
I thought you were joking.
Oh,
I thought it was just a short term.
No, it literally had golden toilets, and it was pretty fancy.
And who was the general you worked under?
So I worked for the top general. His name is General George Casey.
Right.
And as it turned
General
out,
Casey.
Yeah. So he was the head of Iraq when I was over there, and then actually I left to be a speechwriter. And he ended up coming to be the chief of staff of the Army, which was on the Joint Chiefs.
Sure.
And he had me write speeches for him when he was on the Joint Chiefs.
He was the speechwriter for the top people in the Army for 3 years?
That's really cool.
5 years?
3 years. 3 years.
3 years.
So when you say you were a speechwriter, that was your job in the Army.
I was all I did, and actually I was actually called the chief speechwriter because the Army chief of staff had 2 speechwriters, and so I supervised another speechwriter.
That's incredible. I never knew that was a position.
He's an amazing writer.
Well,
I get these edits back from him. I'm like, oh man, I got to up my game. That was. Is there any lessons that you learned in that experience? And this may be that translate to the legal profession. That may be a bad question.
No, I think it's a good question. I mean, a few things. I think. I mean, the one thing I think matters most in the military, and people sort of think, well, is it you gotta know how to shoot and stuff. I think it's integrity. Your word. I mean, you hear these stories when you're a young lieutenant that if your company commander expects you to get to a certain location, and he'll be mad and he'll yell at you if you don't get there. And so you tell him, I'm there, even though if you're not, you could put yourself in a spot where you could be shot at because they're thinking you're someplace else. And I think, in the law, I mean, I think...
Do they teach you integrity in the Army?
100%. And
good.
Of course...
That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, they do. And of course, every field of endeavor, people don't meet that standard. I mean, so I will admit, there are people in the Army who weren't that way. But, I think in the legal profession, and you and I, we work with people, Debbie as well, my word matters. And I think it's really important when you trust the people you work with on the other side, adversarial or collegial. So I think integrity is probably the number one thing.
How has you... So one of the funny things for me working with you, and it's such a pleasure, is... Old friends, we go our different ways. You have successes, I have successes, then you come work with me. One of the funny things I've been talking to him about is, so he wasn't a PI lawyer before he did other things we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
But I'll tell him, like he'd be like, he's working with other lawyers on the other side. I'm like, good guy, trust him, bad guy.
Yeah.
And he's at first he was like, why are you telling me that? But have you figured out, have you figured out that's... Whether someone has integrity on the other side changes how you litigate against them.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, and it's kind of disappointing because, I mean, what's disappointing is, I mean, I worked at the ACLU, and of course we had clients who would not be, really great clients, the Westboro Baptist Church and the KKK.
Yeah.
But everyone I dealt with, when I dealt with like the state of Missouri, because obviously time you sue governments, they were completely trustworthy and honest. And it wasn't personal. And I had great experience. And unfortunately, I mean, I've seen, I've only been here, 3 months, and I would say most of our people that we deal with on the other side are great, willing to coach me and talk to me, but a couple of them, less so.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I wrote down something you said. I love that. Did you catch what he said? Where it doesn't really matter what you're in. In every field of endeavor, people don't meet the standard of there are people who don't meet the standard of integrity, and that's what you're dealing with here. It's just that we know the ones who don't. And that's the ones we know to warn against. Otherwise, you don't really comment. If he says, I'm working against so-and-so, you don't really comment unless there's a reason to comment.
He came out of a depot, and I'm not going to say it was. He came out of a depot, and he's like, this. And I go, who was the lawyer? And he said the name. I was like, oh, yeah, sorry. I should have told you. I got busy. I apologize.
Right.
And then, we talk about this. We've talked about this in other podcasts. And, we think... we have our ethics rules and we have our oath, as lawyers, and we think that our integrity is, that's the guidelines that regulate our integrity. But there are the people that fail. I mean, I sit, we get ethics complaints. I sit on the Regional Disciplinary Commission. I got a meeting tomorrow on it. And so, yeah, how have you found, Grant, enforcing integrity as a lawyer different than in the Army?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Finally got to a good one.
You've been thinking about this.
Yeah.
This is a good question.
I mean, it's really hard, right? I mean, I don't know if you enforce it against the other side as much as I think you try to set the example, right? I would like to think that my integrity, and by demonstrating on what I do day to day, the other side is going to reciprocate. You're right; they don't always do that, but I mean, I think as a profession, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm proud to say I'm a lawyer. I am proud to say I'm a lawyer because I do think most people follow it. It's unfortunate when those that don't.
It's hard.
Debbie, can I turn the question to you? And I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
How do you enforce integrity or try to make people have that integrity?
Embarrassing after
in
the
others.
answer that Grant just gave.
I'm sure you have a better answer. Yeah.
Because I generally just want to pound on people who are that way. So my answer is really embarrassing, and it shows I don't have a very good standard.
No, tell me, no.
But I do. So yesterday, I'm dealing with an attorney who you would know, who is a nice person, a little odd, but a nice person. And we got into a bit of an email spat, and he said to me, "Why don't we just have a call? I think it'll be okay." It was really funny. I thought, that was a brilliant idea, because as soon as we talk, we're okay. Because a lot of what I say sounds more hateful unless you listen to it with my accent. But I'm not a good emailer. So, but the point is, the people who do lead by example, like he did to me, let's just back off and talk about this on the phone. We'll work it out. And we did. And so I would like to say that I lead by example. Maybe I wish I did a little bit more.
I do. Can I answer the question
Yeah,
on the
please
lead by
do.
example that you haven't?
I'm excited to hear it.
Well, I don't. I try to, but I do the same thing. I get into my little rut, or I got too much Irish in me, or
We
I
both
get
do
too,
that.
and I'm like, I want to win this email battle. I want to win this, and sometimes it takes me a second to step back and say, you know what, let's do this on the phone call. But I'm pretty good about not sending that email that I should have waited till tomorrow about. But sometimes I do my best.
You are probably better than me, but we are alike in one thing, and that is we get over it quickly.
Yeah.
I don't hold grudges, so at least that. I got that part down. It's the first part I need to not get riled up about. So, all right, I'm going to follow your example.
No, but I would say though, I mean, but you guys have had a longer career. As one thing I think we'll get at is I've only been a lawyer for 15 years. I was not a lawyer in the Army. And so you guys have a lot more repeat customers who you have to interact with. So I think the bigger question, Garry, will be when I run across a couple of those lawyers who you and I have commented about, again, now that I know about them, and how will my behavior be different? And I'll be curious to see. I'll try to be.
I had a lawyer last week who you know very well, Debbie, who made my client cry in a depot.
Oh no!
And
you'll have to tell me off screen.
And I brought her back in. She sat where you sat, and she was just nervous, and she was, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And we went back in, and before we got on the record, I said, you can do this. You can do what you're doing. He had her show her, like, he's like, who's your cleaning lady? And he made her show her his phone so he could get her phone number. And which is something you would do.
No, I wouldn't.
Well, I don't know
Why
about
would
that.
I care who the cleaner
Anyway,
was?
but the point is that I said, you know what? Before we got, this is what, you made her cry, Can we do this? But can we take the edge off a little bit? And he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He heard me. And then he went through and we got through it and it was fine and she never cried again. And he heard me and I heard him.
Yeah.
But he had a job to do too. I respect him and what he was doing.
That's funny.
But she was a little sensitive too.
Yeah.
A lot of people that would not thrown her. I'm not saying he would do anything wrong. So anyway, but part of
It's
the
not
point
an easy job. What we do every day, it's not
is
easy.
judgment calls. It's
And you know, a lot of what we do is we become hardened to other people's suffering. And that doesn't mean their pain and suffering. It means the discomfort we're putting them through. We become hardened to that.
it's just another one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
just
then-
another guy. They're just going through this. Let's get this done.
But the other thing too that I find you do is not just lead by example. I'm going to always be nice. I'm going to always turn the other cheek. Is that you have a duty to protect your client and make it an equal playing field on both sides. You don't want anybody taking advantage of someone because they don't sit in depots all the day. So you gotta, I think, and you gotta hold that line. And the other thing I think, it's hard to do with a court saying that someone's lying, because if you're a judge, just like we get hardened to things, judges get hardened to lawyers whining at each other. You lied. No, you lied. No, you lied. So that's hard to battle. And unfortunately, lawyers who bend the truth and do that, they can score points. They can get advantage in litigation by those tactics because they do work sometimes. Because the judge doesn't want to hear every little thing. Did you produce that? I gave it to you. No, you didn't. Or you said this. No, I didn't. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
All right, so you're in the military. You retire.
I did.
What year?
So I retired in 2008.
And then you went to law school.
Well, so I knew.
Oh, I guess before that.
I
Okay,
actually
right.
went to law school.
he's really smart.
At night. So I was in Washington, D.C., very lucky. I had a couple jobs there in the early 2000s. And I said, I was getting tired of war, basically. I mean, it was just, nonstop war. And so I applied to go to law school and started in 2002. And, it normally takes 4 years if you do it by night. But because I went to Iraq for a year in between, and then when I got home, I needed to reconnect with my family, so it took me 6 years. So you all did it in 3. I tell people I've got maybe twice as much law school as you. It took me. Of course, my sons point out that it means I'm pretty slow. I'm twice as slow.
That's funny. That is funny. And
So I
then
actually graduated. Believe it or not, I retired at the Pentagon on a Friday. And then my graduation at law school was the next day, Saturday.
Wow, talk about shutting the door on one career
That's a
and
big
opening
change.
it on another.
Were you nervous about that?
I was nervous.
Or were you ready?
I think I was naive. I actually had signed up to work for a big firm here in St. Louis. I moved home because my wife's family was here, so this was we intentionally moved here. And I think, looking at sort of big firm practicing, I'm not going to mention it because I like the firm, but I think being a young associate at a big firm sucks. I mean,
It's also a huge
it's a whole-
transition from the military as your employer to any normal.
Absolutely, but I
non-military.
look at the young. So these are basically 25-year-olds who are going, and so I would think it sucks at age 25 to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was 42.
Yeah.
And so I was completely not happy in doing that, and I didn't last very long, and then I had to leave, and I went to go work for the ACLU.
And so tell us about that.
How was the ACLU?
The
you were there
ACLU
for 7 years?
So I was there for 5 years,
5 years.
from 2010 to 2015, and I will tell you it was an exceptional experience. When I was hired, there was just one attorney. It was the legal director, Tony Rothert, who I just think the world of.
Where were you? Here?
In St. Louis.
That's what I thought.
And so the ACLU of Missouri had one attorney, and so when they hired me, I was attorney number 2. And so
Wow.
just the experience. I mean, I laughed.
Rother's a great lawyer to learn from, isn't he?
He's exceptional. I mean, he's brilliant, and the thing was, he was a good coach and a good mentor, and he trusted me. And there's a room for, as you know, lawyers. There's room to make mistakes, and I look at the mistakes that I made, and over 5 years, it was really a tremendous experience.
So how does the ACLU get cases? How do you pick cases?
Yeah, so what's great is that it's, we get intake just like I think law firms have. I mean, people call in or the email and they say, I have this particular legal problem. And we have law clerks who are, law students primarily who do research, and we decide whether or not we're going to take it. And ultimately, though, it's not the lawyers who pick, there's a board. The ACLU has a legal committee that vets the cases to make sure that, in fact, it supports the purposes of the ACLU. And then once they approve it, then we litigate.
Is that employee board or?
It's a volunteer board, and
Okay.
it's. I want to say it's all lawyers, and I know we would meet once a month, and there's some exceptions. So, for example, I mean, we talk about bad clients, not bad clients, but clients who do, not necessarily bad things. So, for example, one of the early cases we had, the local KKK wanted to have a picnic at a state park, and they contacted us on a Wednesday to say that their picnic, which was going to happen on Saturday, the state wasn't allowing them to have an event at a state park. And we looked at why they rejected them, and they clearly rejected them because they were the KKK and they didn't like the KKK's message. And as it turned out, we don't have to wait a month. So we signed them on as clients. We sued on a Thursday. We had a preliminary a TRO hearing on Friday, and we won. And the case is over.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can go quite fast.
That is fascinating, though. It is ironic to have that sort of client, but of course their rights are being violated.
They are, yeah, and it's
they have rights too.
They are, and it's interesting. I mean, it's maybe a separate talk about legal ethics, but I mean, a lot of times people say to you, "Oh, well, you can get over the fact that you're working for the KKK or the Westboro Baptist Church because you're really you represent the principle, the First Amendment." And I've taught at law school, and I've been a guest lecturer, and I say, can you that's right? I mean, you're just representing the First Amendment, and they all nod, right? I mean, of course, yeah. And the answer is no. The answer is no.
Who's your client?
The person that signed your retainer says it's the KKK. Now, you can set the terms of your relationship with the person, and clearly that's something that we want to make sure that we do. But yeah, there's no question. They were my clients.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, that's where the rubber meets the road in the First Amendment of the ACLU. When you have Westboro Baptist Church or KKK or whoever's on the opposite of your views.
It is, and sometimes you think it's hard, and sometimes it might be hard. I mean, Westboro Baptist Church is one that comes to mind, having been in the military. But another one, we joke, we just had the
do they still do that? Do they still go to these funerals?
Yeah, but there's just not many of these funerals around. But
because there's less war.
There's less war. But as an example, maybe a little less sort of, but just to show you how, I talked about a drunk driver, how I would have a hard time representing them.
Right.
We're now here in October, we just had the 9/11 anniversary, and one of the things that Garry knows about, because I've talked to folks about it, was I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, and the plane actually went underneath my office.
Oh my God!
As it turned out, my floor, no one died. People on the first floor died below me. But what's interesting is one of our clients, one of the very first clients that I had at the ACLU, was a gentleman who would stand out here on an overpass, over 44, here right close to town, and he had a sign, and it was a huge sign that said 9/11 was an inside job. He was absolutely convinced that there was someone who shot a missile from the hill by the Pentagon and shot the Pentagon with the missile. And I laughed with him. I said, I want to totally represent you, and this is free. You have a total right to say this. But I said, by the way, I was there, and I did see plane pieces. There were actually plane pieces next to me. But
what did he say?
So he said, I want to talk to you about it sometime. And I said, well, I didn't want to engage him. He was a very nice man. Very nice man. And we won his case. Went all the way to the 8th Circuit, and we won. It's sometimes hard to do, but I think a lot of times with speech, and again, the fact that you can get crazy ideas out there, those crazy ideas ideally are going to be, disproved by other people talking, but sometimes we see that doesn't happen.
Well, I admire that. That's interesting. I don't know how you couldn't. I mean, I don't think I would be able to not try to change his opinion. So I respect that you didn't, but it's hard.
Did you try to change those people's opinions or have those types of conversations with them? Or are you like, I'm not going to persuade them, so what's the point?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I think trying to convince someone of a religion is I think they were totally, like Westboro Baptist Church, completely sincere in their religious beliefs. I mean, I have no problem saying that. Oftentimes religions have views that other religions or non-believers think are crazy. I'm not going to convince someone who holds those beliefs.
And they have a First Amendment right to believe them, and that is very important to our country.
Absolutely.
Regardless of whether you agree with the content of the speech.
100%. In fact, there's really, it's one of the things I find is interesting is the Westboro Baptist Church is actually sort of a Calvinist view, and the view is that God is a punisher. He's a old Testament God who punishes people and countries when they, and in their view, God was punishing America because it tolerated LGBT, right? That's the sort of thing. But if you take a look back and read like Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, he was a Calvinist. He said the reason that we are going through this horrible war is because God is punishing America because of slavery. And so it's the same. I don't want to put Abraham Lincoln and the Westboro Baptist Church on the same level, but I think those beliefs, you can kind of see where they are.
The similarity, the logical similarity at least. Interesting. So ACLU, and then what else?
So then after that, I actually, Garry knows we have kids who went to school together, and kids cost money. And so as much as the ACLU was good, I needed some extra money.
Yeah.
So I went to go work for the federal government again, working at the EEOC. So I was an employment lawyer for the last 7 years.
And so what did you do for the EEOC?
So it's a St. Louis regional office. So it's basically 5 states. And basically you probably 40% of your time you advise investigators on what sort of things they're looking for to find discrimination. And then the other 60% is litigation. It's all federal litigation.
So you take the cases they decide to prosecute. You prosecute the cases.
Correct.
As each lawyer.
Yeah, that's right.
That's interesting too. You've got some stories which we probably can't get into.
No, but
but you do have.
The EEOC has a robust. It's a busy practice, isn't it? There's a lot going on.
It is a busy practice, but as you probably know, if you've done employment law in your practices, most of our cases are litigated by private attorneys, and so a lot of times we're just helping get the investigators to get the cases through the investigation.
Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't litigate as much as we do sort of here for you, Garry. We litigate a lot. The EEOC does not.
What about what's been the differences coming into a personal injury plaintiff's practice in the last few months from your prior experience as counsel, as a lawyer?
I like the pace. It is just nonstop. It is nonstop. And that's how I like to kind of operate. I joke about attention deficit disorder, but in some ways, right?
It does help.
In some ways, it's very, very good. It's more. What I do now is more similar to what I did at the ACLU than I did at the EEOC. And the number of cases that I have are and the different types of cases. It's invigorating. I like coming to work every day. I like when I leave the day and I feel like I've accomplished something. It's good.
It's one of the things that you have many talent. One of the things that just strikes me hearing your story again, I've heard it before, is that the courage that you've had throughout your life to try new things, embrace new things, do new things, and that's a real testament to you. It's hard to sit and go to law school at age 36.
Yeah.
And then go do that with people that are 15 years young, and then have a career, and then do that, and to serve. And you served at the highest levels in the Army, and then do these different jobs. So it's very interesting. Do you feel courageous?
No, I appreciate you saying so, but what's interesting though is, you notice that, there's different types of courage, right? I think, you talk, there could be physical courage. Maybe early in my career, jumping out of a plane could be physically courageous, but I really think lawyers on a daily basis, it requires moral courage, right? Moral courage, and it requires, I think courage and sometimes taking real risk. I've told you, Garry, and you took a chance on me. To the extent that you're hiring someone who's 56, who hasn't done PI work before, and that, courage might not be the word you'd put on it, but you're sort of taking, I think, a calculated chance. And I think you set up a business and a law firm. You're taking some calculated risks and chances.
You're that old?
Can I say that? This is an employment lawyer. Am I allowed to say that?
You take those chances, though, with every employee. You really do. We take equal, don't you think, even a known entity?
You do.
Because they all have different challenges. They all
different skills and different things.
Yeah.
Different things.
So what do you think your biggest challenge has been so far? We'll end it kind of with that.
Here?
No. Just what you've overcome a ton of challenges. It sounds like.
So raising children.
Is that right? That's a tough thing.
It is. I have three boys who are amazing kids, but each of them have provided joys beyond measure. But there's challenges in parenting, and I think it's hard. And marriage. I mean, marriage is hard as well too. I mean,
people don't talk about that. You all enter thinking it's going to be so blessed.
It's not.
Blissful.
No.
We're not gonna. Can I change the subject?
Yeah.
No. Marriage. Well, when you're
don't
married
wanna
to
talk about
such a lovely wife as I have,
It's true that
There's
it's pretty
no.
easy.
It's pretty easy. I think we're all married to amazing people.
We are.
Having know all of
But
our.
my husband is not.
Not what?
Married to an amazing person. I'm awful.
I saw a picture of you on Facebook, and someone come like, "Hey, he made it into a picture." Oh,
That's right.
yeah. Well, Grant, hey, listen, our time's up today. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing part of your life. It's a fascinating
It's
story.
been a pleasure to me.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you. This has been and thanks for working with me. I really enjoyed. He's really a great to work with. It's so much fun.
That's good.
Well, teaching
You
him
need
some
to
things, but
surround
also
yourself.
learning from him
Isn't
and
that wonderful?
being surrounded by good people.
Plus, he's going to know a lot of stuff you never knew you needed to know.
He does. He's like, "So you should do it this." I'm like, "Oh, maybe we should." And and he's like, "Why do you want to laugh at me?"
Yeah.
I for years I would file a reply to affirmative defenses because I started doing it a long time ago.
Illinois.
I know. And he goes, and he did it, and he's like, and he researched it. He goes, you don't have to do that. I'm like, oh, darn it, I guess I don't, and we stopped. So yeah, I can still learn new things too. So we all can. Anyway, thanks, Grant. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Garry. Thanks,
Thank
Debbie.
you.